This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'll reveal the latest move in the Biden DOJ's protection racket, a pathetic and happily unsuccessful attempt to block Hunter Biden's business partner, Devon Archer, from testifying before Congress. I'll warn that Biden might be getting ready to declare a climate emergency to justify comprehensive COVID-style controls over the economy. An author and radio host, Wayne Allyn Root, joins me. We're going to talk about concrete ways to defeat woke ideology. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble, please subscribe to my channel. There's also a little join button, red button on Rumble, which you should click. It'll take you to locals. You can check out my locals channel. Also, if you're listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
Hunter Biden's good friend and business partner, Devon Archer, is going to testify this morning, today, before the House, I believe it's the Oversight Committee. And this is going to be a closed-door hearing, so it's not going to be public, at least not yet. But typically what happens is that after these meetings, Representative Comer or one of the other members will release information about what the content of that testimony was. Now, interestingly, the New York Post got a preview of what Devon Archer is going to say or is expected to say. And it's pretty damning because Devon Archer is going to tell Congress that on multiple occasions, Joe Biden, not Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden, was directly involved in these business transactions involving apparent bribes from foreign entities in exchange for political access. That Hunter Biden would connect with these guys. He was the kind of front man, but then he would get Joe Biden on the phone, or Joe Biden would call in, or he'd put Joe Biden on speakerphone, and Joe Biden could converse directly with these potential, bribe payers or influence buyers or whatever you want to call them. So this directly contradicts Biden's claim. I had nothing to do with my son's businesses. I've never spoken about any of these businesses to other family members. The White House is now kind of backing away from that and taking a kind of fallback position. Quote, Hunter Biden or Joe Biden was not in business with his son. Now notice that's a completely different thing. They're not officially in business. And you can see how there's all kinds of shadings that can be applied to that. Well, yeah, of course, Hunter Biden shared the loot. Well, yeah, Joe Biden kind of called in, but that doesn't mean that they were business partners per se. And so this is a way of the White House retreating in the face of indisputable evidence, even though the media so far is still kind of very cautiously trying to stay away from all this, trying to downplay it. They throw in words like unsupported, unproven, unsubstantiated. Notice, by the way, when they were investigating Russia collusion against Trump, none of these kind of warning words or warning labels. Hey, this is unsupported, it's unproven, we don't know for a fact. So all these caveats are now attending media coverage of the subject. Now, in a very interesting development, the Biden DOJ, the very people, the kind of consigliere operation for the Biden mafia, headed by Merrick Garland. And by the way, one day if Merrick Garland retires or gets out of government, he'll have an excellent job, I think, working for an organized crime syndicate, because here you have himself a kind of corrupt mafia consigliere, but he now has excellent government experience. So he'll have a lot to put on his resume. Well, the Biden DOJ, it seems, was trying to prevent Devon Archer from testifying before Congress. Over this past weekend, they sent a letter to a judge, and the judge, this is Judge Abrams, and they said, we need Devon Archer to show up and check into prison. Wait, what? Now, there's a little bit of a backstory here, and that is that Devon Archer who was apparently not, he himself, think of it. This is a guy who's in business with the Bidens. So he's got to be himself a little shady. I think that the Biden people have scared him. And I think he's now realized that the jig is up. And this is why he's testifying before Congress. He's decided to be truthful in the same way that, for example, people who are connected to the mafia go, okay, listen, you know what? I'll cooperate with the cops. This is the best way I can get a good deal. And I'll reveal what I know. But Devon Archer was accused and convicted in a fraud case. The fraud case is unrelated to his dealings with the Bidens. In fact, it involves a conspiracy supposedly to defraud a Native American tribe. Now, Devon Archer says that he didn't do that, and even though he was convicted, he is appealing his conviction. Normally, when someone is appealing a conviction, they're not going to be automatically put into jail. The jail sentence is going to await the fate of the appeal. So it was really unusual that the Biden DOJ is like, over the weekend, hey, Devon Archer needs to show up for jail right now. And it seemed like transparent effort to prevent him from showing up on Monday, today, and testifying before Congress. So this created really quite a stir. And Matt Gaetz and others were raging about it on social media, basically saying, listen, this is the last straw. If Devon Archer doesn't show up, essentially there's going to be hell to pay. And Representative Comer was on Maria Bartiromo's show, and he went on to lay out that, look, this is a very disturbing business. The Devon Archer has a lot to tell us. He's agreed to come. There have been actually several delays before his testimony. Now he's scheduled to testify. And right before that happens, we have this, convenient, or maybe we should say inconvenient demand that he show up and check himself into a prison. Well, the Biden DOJ realized that this is not going to go well for them. And so they backed off. They sent a new letter to the judge, which I'm looking at it right now. The government writes to follow up on its July 29th letter. The government understands the defendant is scheduled to provide testimony to Congress tomorrow, July 31st. To be clear, the government does not request, and then parentheses, this is the funny part, and has never requested that the defendant surrender before his congressional testimony. Well, they wanted him to check himself into jail on Monday. So what do they want? Him to go testify first to Congress and then find his way to prison really on the same day? No, but they're backing off. And so they go, nevertheless, for the avoidance of all doubt, the government requests that any surrender date, should the court order one, be scheduled to occur after the defendant's congressional testimony is completed. So let's just say they made a valiant effort, these crooks with badges did, to block Hunter Biden from testifying before Congress. The scheme didn't work. They were forced to back off, and now we eagerly await Devon Archer, not Hunter Biden, but Devon Archer's actual testimony. Debbie and I are on a great health journey, but we still struggle to eat enough fruits, veggies, and fiber. Now, lucky for us, we discovered Balance of Nature, and what better way to get all your fruits and veggies plus fiber than with Balance of Nature. Balance of Nature fruits and veggies right here. They're made from fresh, whole produce. The produce is powdered after an advanced vacuum cold process, which stabilizes the maximum nutrient content. And the Balance of Nature fiber and spice, right here, a proprietary blend of fiber and 12 spices for overall and digestive health. Start your journey to better health right now. This is the final week to get a free fruits and veggies travel set plus $25 off your first order as a preferred customer when you use promo code America. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751. Or go to balanceofnature.com. Use discount code America. Some prominent energy executives are expressing the concern, the fear, that Joe Biden will announce a climate emergency and arrogate to himself the kind of powers, the sweeping, comprehensive powers that the government assumed under COVID. So just as there was a declared, it's a health emergency, so we've got to lock down the economy, we've got to fire people who don't take the vaccine, that came a little bit later, we've got to require masking, we've got to require social distancing, we've got to do surveillance on people to make sure they do those things. Now, there could be something similar that is imposed because of so-called climate emergency. So what could that mean? Well, it could mean that the government says, well, we're going to stop crude oil exports. We're going to end offshore oil and gas leasing. We're going to restrict U.S. fossil fuel exports and hundreds of billions of dollars in overseas fossil fuel investments. We will dramatically accelerate a transition to clean energy. And perhaps even more extreme, we're going to restrict energy consumption in this country. We're going to have blackouts. We're going to not provide energy on a 24-hour basis and so on. All this kind of responses to a supposed emergency. Now, emergencies in the past were by and large for wars. And yeah, they were probably also for things like a pandemic with a high mortality rate. But we can see under COVID how this emergency power business became a pretext, and became a pretext ultimately on the basis of falsehoods. What were the falsehoods? Well, if you take the vaccine, you're not going to get COVID. Falsehood number one. If you take the vaccine, you can't transmit COVID. Falsehood number two. In fact, ask yourself how many people would have taken a vaccine if they had announced beforehand, we know that this is not going to prevent you from getting COVID or giving it to someone else. All the rhetoric, all the propaganda, don't you care about old people? You may not get COVID, but don't you care about more vulnerable people segments of the population that can get it? So how selfish are you not to wear a mask or not to take the vaccine? And well, if it turns out that the vaccine doesn't do that, doesn't prevent that, then the whole underlying rationale collapses. And I think the same is true with this climate emergency stuff. The fact of it is there's no climate emergency. There is what we call in Texas summer. And it's always hot in Texas in the summer. Now, some years it's a little hotter. Some years it's not quite as hot. So there's some variation. But of course, the left realizes that in order to make their case, they've got to claim that it's historically hot. It's more hot than ever before. And so we got to have the word historic creeping up in all these articles. Here's a classic. Here's one from the Washington Post. Heat waves in U.S., Europe, quote, virtually impossible without climate change, study finds. Now, the simple truth of it is you can get some climate data and take a quick look to see, is it a fact that this is unprecedented heat? We've never had this before. Turns out that is not the case. Government has been tracking heat waves for more than 100 years. By the way, if you go back even further back, the Earth was much hotter. You've got, in fact, 25 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than we are today. So the idea that this is the hottest ever is nonsense. At times when there were no humans around and there wasn't man-made carbon emissions, the planet was a lot hotter, showing you that there are lots of other factors at play here. In the 1930s, the annual heat wave index for the United States, a lot higher than it is today. Think about it. There was a lot less human-created CO2 in the atmosphere in the 1930s than there is now, almost 100 years later, and yet it was hotter then. Now, these news articles don't want to have to explain all this, because a rational article would be like, well, yeah, it was hotter, but that's because of this. But no, they don't want to do any of this. So what do? They engage in a certain kind of rhetorical or numerical legerdemain. So legerdemain is sort of sleight of hand. And what does that mean? What that means is that they go in search of a time, a decade, when things were really cool. And then they measure now against that decade. And they go, wow, compare to that. Take a look. It's gotten hotter. Well, yeah, but in a cyclical system, if you pick the trough, and then you compare that to any other point, you're generally going to see that the temperatures have gone up. So this is called rigging the data in such a way as to show a predetermined conclusion. Is it hot in certain places in America today? Yeah. But you know what? It's cooler in other places. The Midwest, for example, is cooler than it has been in previous years. So what I'm getting at is that this notion of a climate emergency is not a real thing. It is not based upon any sort of undisputable trends in the data. Rather, it's based upon cherry picking the starting point and the end point of when you decide to count. By the way, if you start to count from the 1990s, temperatures are down. There's no so-called global warming. And by the way, This is another reason they use the term climate change. So my point is that just as with COVID, any climate emergency, and we're not sure if there's going to be one declared or not, but if there is, it is nothing more than a pretext for governmental control over industry, over the economy, and over our lives. Have you heard about the Durban Accords? Are the greatest threat to the US dollar's global dominance in the past 80 years. On August 22nd, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are expected to announce the launch of a new international supercurrency fully backed by gold or other commodities. Now, this is all part of a long-term plan to supplant the US and the dollar as cornerstones of the global financial system. How can you protect your IRA or 401k from the fallout from this landmark announcement? Well, you can diversify with gold from Birch Gold Group. Historically, gold has been a safe haven in times of high uncertainty, which of course is right now. Get a free information kit on gold IRAs and decide for yourself if a tax-sheltered retirement account backed by physical precious metals is right for you. Text the word Dinesh to 989898. There's a monumental shift happening among nations that control 1/3 of the world's GDP starting August 22nd. Protect your retirement savings. Text Dinesh to the number 989898. Claim your free information kit on gold from Birch Gold. Who is the most intelligent justice on the U.S. Supreme Court? Debbie and I were talking about this, and probably most conservatives would give the answer Clarence Thomas. He is the outstanding justice. He's certainly been there the longest. And so he has seniority. He's also a terrific justice and very bold in his thinking. But I would have to say that if I had to pick a single justice who intellectually stands a little bit above everyone else, it is Samuel Alito. His decisions are so powerfully written. And why are they so powerfully written? Well, it's partly because he doesn't just content himself with looking at, this is what the Constitution says, and this is what I'm deciding. Because as Alito rightly points out, you can have a constitutional situation where the language itself can be interpreted one way, but the intention of the framers or even the history of the meaning of that clause is completely different. A really good example, the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the laws, was established in order to protect racial minorities. Everybody is equal under the law. It didn't have anything to do with sex or with gender or with sex roles. And yet, if you just say equal treatment of the laws, then that can be automatically applied even to areas it was never intended to apply. Well, it applies to equality between, let's say, adults and children. No, it doesn't. It wasn't about that. It applies to male and female on the transgender issue. No, it doesn't. It's not even about that. So Alito's point is that you have to look at the text of the Constitution, the intention of the framers, and the history that attends the meaning of that particular clause. Why was it passed? Now, so Alito's opinions have this kind of combination. Recently, Alito was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. He spoke very candidly about some of the other justices. Now, the part of his statements that is being talked about is where he talks about ethics and ethics requirements for the court. And Alito, again, is very sort of frank. He goes, I know this is a controversial view, but I'm willing to say it. No provision in the Constitution gives them the authority to regulate the Supreme Court, period. Now, what is Alito saying? He's saying in a system that is based upon separation of powers, where you want an independent judiciary, and the Congress and the president should not be able to have a leash on the court, because then they can intimidate the court. And why do you think the left wants all these ethics guidelines? They want to tame the court. They want to teach the court a lesson. They want to impose legislative restrictions on the court. And Alito's point is, where's the constitutional authority to do that? Where does the Constitution say that Congress gets to oversee the operations of the court? So Alito's not saying we don't want ethics. He's not saying we don't want ethics guidelines. He's saying the issue is who establishes those ethical guidelines. So, for example, who establishes the ethical guidelines for Congress? Answer, Congress. Congress establishes its own ethical guidelines, so Congress regulates itself. Well, why can't the court regulate itself? This is Alito's point. Not that you can't have ethical regulations, but the ethical regulations would need to be internal. The court is an independent branch and can establish its own rules for how it's going to function. So this is the part that's been sort of debated and is being argued about. But I find it also interesting that Alito offers a couple of really interesting comments about his colleagues. He talks about Clarence Thomas and how Clarence Thomas's approach is essentially informed by a kind of let's look at the principle of this particular case and let's not worry too much about precedent. So the issue of so-called stare decisis, what the court decided before, is not so important for Clarence Thomas. He would happily overrule precedents that he thinks are wrong. And for this reason, Thomas is often a dissenter on the court. Even in a conservative court, you sometimes have Thomas kind of way out there by himself because the other justices are less willing to overrule precedent. Even in for example, the Dobbs case, where the court overruled Roe versus Wade, it made it pretty clear that we're not attacking the contraception cases. It distinguished the abortion cases from other cases. Another point that Alito makes, and this time about Justice Roberts, is he says that Justice Roberts is a consensus guy. He doesn't like to be in the minority, so he tries to find a way that he can vote with the majority. And this is very much in keeping with what we know about Justice Roberts, the fact that Justice Roberts is a kind of coalition builder. So you've got a coalition builder, Justice Roberts on the one side, you've got Justice Thomas perhaps at the other extreme, and in the middle, a stalwart intellectual force on the court, one Samuel Alito. MyPillow has its 20th year anniversary. Over 80 million MyPillows sold, and Mike Lindell at MyPillow wants to thank each and every one of you by giving you the lowest price in history on his MyPillows. You get a queen size MyPillow for $19.98, regular price $69.98, and just $10 more for a king size. You get deep discounts on all the MyPillow products, the MyPillow bed sheets, the mattress toppers, the pet beds, the robes, the mattresses, the My Slippers, and so much more. This is the time to really surf the site and try out some of the amazing products you've had your eye on. Go to MyPillow.com, use promo code Dinesh to get the amazing offer on the queen size MyPillow for $19.98, or call 800-876-0227. The offer comes with a 10-year warranty, a 60-day money-back guarantee. It's time to start getting the quality sleep you deserve. Go ahead and call 800-876-0227 or go to mypillow.com. Don't forget to use the promo code, which is DINESH Dinesh. Guys, I'd really like to welcome to the podcast my friend Wayne Allyn Root. He is host of the Wayne Allyn Root Raw and Unscripted, but he's also the author of a terrific book, The Great Patriot Boycott Book. Not boycott book, that was his previous one, but boycott book. And Wayne, by the way, his website, rootforamerica.com. You can follow him on Twitter at RealWayneRoot, R-O-O-T. Wayne, a real pleasure. Great to have you on the podcast. There has been all this stuff going on with conservatives on the one hand saying, we don't want to patronize companies that are insulting and assaulting our cherished values, and we instead would like to defect or to patronize companies that share our values. Can you talk a little bit about how this movement even came about? It's relatively new. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we didn't talk about this kind of thing. Is that because you suddenly got this woke fever in corporate America? What got all this going?
Well, you said defect. I think defund might be a better word. You know, the left wanted to defund the police. How insane. Now we found out what happens when you defund the police. You have massive crime waves across America, and a lot of people pay with their lives. And sadly, Dinesh, a lot of those people that pay with their lives are Democrat voters in inner cities. So defund the police doesn't work, but defund the woke corporations does work. And look, Muhammad Ali said it ain't bragging if you could back it up. I'm the godfather of this movement. I'm the guy who started with national radio, national TV, saying, look, I believe elections are rigged and stolen. Look at your wonderful movie, 2000 Mules. Elections are absolutely being stolen all over the United States. So, look, I want us to keep voting. I don't want us to be discouraged. I want every Republican, conservative, patriot to get out there and vote. But I'm just pointing out a fact. We can't control the outcome of elections if they're rigged. We don't know if we're going to win elections. But what we can control, this is my original theory, is with our wallets and our pocketbooks, we could put the left out of business. We could starve them. We could financially strangle them. We could financially smother them. And was my first idea with the Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book 2 years ago. Matter of fact, I've got it here. Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book, 114 companies that we believed, my co-author and I, it's Wayne Allyn Root and Nikki Ballou, and we believed when we did a year of research that these companies were the most woke and the most offensive to conservatives. And if you stopped spending money with them, we believed we could put a lot of them out of business. And I'm very proud. It came out about a year and a half ago. We wrote it 2 years ago. And it's got Disney, it's got Target, it's got Bed Bath & Beyond, it's got Ben & Jerry's, it's got Victoria's Secret. It's got all the companies we now know, Dinesh, are woke. And since this book came out, my buddies on Wall Street studied the companies I put in it, and they're down over $1 trillion in market cap. So we've really hit them where it hurts. I'm not the only one. It was all of us. It was the whole conservative movement that did this. But I kind of started the ball rolling and was the godfather of this boycott idea. So now I came up with what would be part two. Well, that would be the boycott, the Great Patriot Boycott book. Here's all the top companies that you can boycott. There's over 100 companies in here that you can buy from. Instead of the negative side of the coin, it's the positive side of the coin. Let's spend our money with companies run by conservatives and patriots and Republicans and Christians and anybody who loves God and country. And that's what this book's about. And it got endorsed by President Trump. And I'm proud to say, I just got back from a 10-day vacation last night, late. So I'm just now waking up to the world. I knew I had your interview first thing this morning. Last night, I got a Google alert that my name was mentioned. Usually I get that 100 times a day. I clicked on this one and it was Newsweek. And they did a story on President Trump, how his allies and his enemies both agree he has not been active enough fighting woke companies. And the article says the only time he's ever made mention of Bud Light and the woke companies and boycotting woke companies was when he endorsed Wayne Allyn Root's book, The Great Patriot Boycott book. That was the quote in Newsmax. They said that's the only time he's ever waded into the war between right and left over woke companies. So I was very proud to see that. And I'm thrilled he endorsed my book. And I'm thrilled he said there's only one way to beat these guys. Bud Light figured it out, and so we got to do the same thing to everybody. Go buy a copy of Wayne Root's book, The Great Patriot Boycott book. Well, you know what's funny? Bud Light didn't figure it out, Dinesh. They still are being woke. So we've got to keep this up until they're out of business. We did it with Bed Bath & Beyond. We're doing it with Disney. They're being destroyed. We're going to do it with Target, Ben & Jerry's. There's so many companies. I can't list them all. How about the country music television, CMT? They tried to, defund Jason Aldean's hit single, and now they're getting defunded. We're going to shut them off. So we can do this. We maybe can't affect an election if it's rigged. We have to fight to unrig it and make them stop committing voter fraud. But one thing we can do is we can use our pocketbooks and our purse. We are the silent majority. We spend all the consumer money. And so we are the king of consumerism, and we can punish, badly defund, and put these companies on notice that if you offend conservatives and Christians and patriots, we will put you out of business.
Let's take a pause, Wayne. When we come back, more from Wayne Allyn Root, the author of the Great Patriot Boycott book. If aches and pains are your problem, Relief Factor is your remedy. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago, and what a difference we've seen in our joints. Nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. How does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor love it, and they order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do the exercises that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a real game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again, 800-4RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. I'm back with my pal, Wayne Allyn Root, host of Wayne Allyn Root, Raw and Unscripted. He's also the author of the Great Patriot Boycott book. His website, Root, R-O-O-T, for America.com. Wayne, let's talk about boycotts for a second. You know, when you have a whole bunch of companies, like let's say, for example, most of the banks are doing in one way or the other woke stuff, it's a little bit hard, isn't it, to know, because presumably you and I still have to use the banking system. Now, if it's one company doing it, you can say, I'm going to go drink a different kind of beer, for example. But what do you do when you've got across an industry, the woke contagion has taken root? Do you pick the worst offender and sort of body slam that guy so everybody else gets the message? What's the strategy?
Well, look, that's the idea in our book. We picked the companies, we cherry-picked. In my original book, The Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book, we cherry-picked the companies that we thought were the most woke of any in the industry. And then in my new book, The Great Patriot Boycott book, I cherry-picked what I thought were the best. And I found one for pretty much every industry. If you want a retirement account, we found a company that you could put, that's kind of a hedge fund or a retirement account you could put your money in. We found a bank that was just formed by a bunch of conservative patriots. It's in my book that you could put your money in, that they'll never debank you because you're a conservative. But we only found one. You're definitely on the money. It's hard in some industries, like Hollywood, right? Almost every movie is made by a liberal. Almost every song is sung by a negative liberal rocker. Almost every TV show is starring liberals. Every TV commercial for every company is woke and featuring the LGBT agenda, the trans agenda. Almost everyone on TV now, it appears like 70% of everyone I watch on TV now is a minority of color or gay. And that's great. I have nothing against anyone of any color. I never have. I've never been against immigrants, Dinesh. I love immigrants as long as they come here legally and they don't want welfare. And I feel the same way about Black Americans, about Latino Americans, about gay Americans. Great. But if you really believe in, a society that's colorblind, like Martin Luther King wanted, then you wouldn't have everybody on TV being of color or gay or lesbian or trans, because that isn't the entire population of the United States. I believe in hiring because somebody's talented. And if they're Black and they're more talented than somebody who's white, great. I give them the job every time because I'll make more money as the CEO with a talented person who happens to be Black. I only care if you're talented and you have a great resume and you're great at selling and you're a great employee. That's all I care about. Color your skin is meaningless. I'm like Martin Luther King, colorblind. But that's not what's happening. All these companies are the opposite of colorblind. They're the opposite of what Martin Luther King wanted. They don't want a society that's colorblind. Every college now, Harvard, I went to Columbia, Ivy League schools, they only let you in if you are gay, trans, Black, of color. They don't want white, straight males anymore. This is the new form of racism and discrimination and bias in the United States of America. So I just think we got to keep fighting back. You're right. There are some industries where you can't fight back. Maybe you don't find the best company, but you find the least of the worst. But there's always someone in every industry that's either the best or maybe the least of the worst that you have to worry about. And I think I've isolated them all in the Great Patriot Boycott book and the Great Patriot Protest and Boycott book. That was our goal. Find the best of the best or the least of the worst. And I think we did that. And by the way, 2 weeks after this book came out, 2 weeks, I had to come out with a second edition and eliminate two of the companies on the list. I had Anheuser-Busch as the good guy because they'd given mostly Republican contributions, as Donald Trump Jr. tried to argue at the beginning of the boycott, that Bud Light is owned by Anheuser, and they gave almost all Republican contributions. So in our research, we thought they were a great company. And I also listed Fox News, which I thought, for the most part, even though they did some things I did not like on the election night 2020, and some of their hosts were not as nice as I'd like as far as the pro-patriot conservative Trump movement, I still put them in my book as the only alternative out there for conservatives that was a great network. I got rid of both of them. Fox News is out. Anheuser-Busch is out. You can't have in a book for patriots. So, as companies turn rotten, as you see worse and worse things happening, as Fox fired Tucker, as Bud Light hired Dylan Mulvaney, I realized it's changed overnight and we got to kick him out of the book. And I put out my new second edition that was endorsed by President Trump. That's the way. I'm Exhibit A for how you treat these woke companies. One day you buy from them. When you realize they're bad companies, they've gone woke, you get rid of them quickly. You take action and you punish them and you defund them.
I mean, this seems to be just a really good resource for people, because you'll have people who say, well, if I can't take my kids to Disney, where can I take them? Or if I don't use Chase Bank, what bank can I use? So it's really good that you've been thinking ahead of this and going, okay, listen, if we're going to create a parallel economy, I mean, eventually there's a lot more things we have to build, right? Because these days it's not just, for example, I make a movie, but the whole industry of critics is dominated by the left. So those guys quickly go on Rotten Tomatoes. I'll get a very low score from the critics, even if a high score from the audience. So we've got to build a lot of institutions to rival what the left has. But it looks to me, you got to start somewhere. And this book, The Great Patriot Boycott, is an excellent resource for people to practical advice. If you want to, put your dollars where your beliefs are, then this is the way to do it. Hey, Wayne Allyn Root, thank you.
One more example. Do you have time for one more example?
Go for it, yes.
So as an example, Amazon, right? You really, it's hard to take Amazon completely out of your life. Everything you want to buy in life is at Amazon. It's easy, it's simple, it comes in a day. But Amazon's very woke and very liberal. So I say to people, stop buying at Amazon except for books. They've got every conservative book in the whole universe. They've got Dinesh's books. They got my books. If you want to buy a book, you have to buy it at Amazon. So, okay, here's the compromise. You buy your conservative books at Amazon, and maybe you don't buy anything else there, or you cut down dramatically what you buy there. And I find another company that's just like Amazon called GreatPatriotStore.com, and I put them as the third company I favor in this book. I put Trump and Mike Lindell 1 and 2. Trump Organization and Mike Lindell's company, My Pillow, were number 1, number 2, and then GreatPatriotStore.com. They sell almost everything you need in the whole world online, delivered quickly to your home, and they're run by conservatives and patriots. And they've got, I think it's over 20,000 conservatives a month are joining and buying at GreatPatriotStore.com, because you have to be a member like Costco or like Sam's Club. So it's very inexpensive. You become a member and everything is dramatically lower priced than you'd find it at Amazon or Costco or Lowe's or Sam's Club. So it's a great alternative. So buy your books at Amazon.com and then replace all the other products with GreatPatriotStore.com. Those are the kind of examples I give you in my new book, The Great Patriot Boycott Book.
Excellent stuff. And thank you, Wayne Allyn Root, for joining me.
Thank you, Dinesh. God bless you for all you do.
Guys, I'd like to invite you to check out my Locals channel. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that's censored on other social media platforms. So on Locals, you get Dinesh Uninhibited, Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly each week. I do a live weekly Q&A. It's every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some very cool films to Locals, both documentaries and feature films, my films, and also films by other independent producers. 2000 Mules is up there, and I'm doing a big new film this year. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on Locals. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch all these films for free. Go ahead and check out my channel. It's dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. There's been a really notable shift, one that maybe not enough people have taken note of, in the public response to the idea of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or even to push it further, aliens visiting us from other planets. Now, in the past, if you roll the clock back 20 years or 30 years ago, there was, on the one hand, very unreliable reports about UFOs or aliens. You have a bunch of guys, basically drinking in Virginia, and they're like, we saw an alien, and it came in a saucer. And when they give these descriptions, they seem, very suspiciously to resemble science fiction accounts of aliens. I'm sure there are a lot of people who saw aliens that look like E.T. kind of after the movie came out. Yeah, I think I saw E.T. It really looked like E.T. And so the rest of us hearing these accounts were very dismissive. But on the other hand, the level of public interest in UFOs and in aliens was very high. That's why movies like E.T., but also Close Encounters, Steven Spielberg's movie, were huge successes because of the sort of public appetite for learning more. If there was life on other planets, what might it look like? How might those creatures, how might their intelligence manifest itself? How might they relate to us? Now, what I find quite interesting is that you've got these Navy pilots and Air Force guys who, again, they're not the same as some guy sitting on his trailer and drinking a lot of beer. These are informed sources. These are guys who have inside knowledge. They know about the SETI project. They know about the Defense Department and its efforts to monitor objects in outer space. And these guys, well, three of them appear before Congress, and one of them startlingly says that not only does he have knowledge of sightings of UFOs, but evidently he says that the U.S. government is in possession of non-human biological matter. In other words, a living creature of some sort, but not made up of the same chemistry as human beings or other life as we know it on Earth. And the U.S. government is holding on to it. So you would expect this to be a giant story. You'd expect this to create a huge upsurge of public concern, maybe fear, maybe excitement. Gee, we're not alone. But in fact, nothing. In fact, if you troll social media and you look around, you see basically people are making almost sarcastic comments or silly comments. Here's a silly comment. Are aliens going to fix inflation, cancel student debt and worker exploitation, pay my bills, turn the temperature down on the planet? This is the kind of tedious person you do not want to associate with. But nevertheless, they're like, these are the real problems. Aliens don't have any solutions. Yeah, I guess they don't. And that makes them uninteresting, right? And then you also have people talking about the fact that, can the aliens take me back with them? Earth kind of sucks lately. So this is what I call the sardonic observations. But I think what's striking is I don't know if it's a lack of interest in aliens per se, or if it is the case that people have heard so much through movies, through science fiction about aliens, about UFOs, that it's like, yeah, show me something. I'm tired of this discussion. Or perhaps most important, I don't really believe it. In other words, even though you've got relatively more credible spokesmen coming before Congress, even though they're talking about biological material, it's like, show it to me. It's part of the distrust of our institutions that we're like, nah, you're just saying this because you're trying to deflect attention from something else. But my point is, it's very interesting that even though there is perhaps more concrete evidence now than there ever was in the past, it's being met with a collective public shrug. Who cares? I'd like to talk about the future of AM radio in the United States. Are you an AM radio listener in the car? Well, Debbie is, and she loves AM radio. And why? Because AM radio is, it's local guys for the most part giving you a straight take on national and international issues, to be sure, but also local issues. And of course, AM radio covers the full gamut. It covers sports. It covers local weather conditions and health dangers and tornadoes and cyclones. And but it also, traffic. It covers traffic patterns. And AM radio also has a sort of a remarkable history in the United States. In fact, Franklin Roosevelt did his famous fireside chats, Well, guess how America listened to those? AM radio. Ronald Reagan was a baseball announcer early in his career before he decided to go out to Hollywood. He would announce the Chicago Cubs games on AM radio. So AM radio has produced a lot of stars of comedy, stars of talk radio, Don Imus, Paul Harvey, I guess. And then FM radio came along, and in some ways FM radio was clearer. The signals were clearer than AM radio, but people would be like, well, I got AM, I got FM. And AM radio was automatically installed in the America. So AM radio in cars. So AM radio, the history of AM radio kind of goes hand in hand with the history of the automobile. And it's partly because even though now we are in a different age, there's television, there's the internet, there's streaming, all kinds of different ways to get content. The simple truth of it is a lot of people, when you're driving, you're not exactly going to be like, well, listen, you know what, I'm going to program my system. No, you just turn on the radio and you just listen to what's going on. And if you don't like the station, you move to another station and you listen there. Well, it turns out that there are a number of automobile companies that are discontinuing AM radio. They're not even putting AM radio in their cars. BMW, Volkswagen, Mazda, Tesla. So these are some of the big companies that are discontinuing AM radio. Maybe Ford as well. Now, there's a bunch of other companies that still have AM radio, and those include Mitsubishi, Nissan, Toyota, Subaru, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Jaguar, Land Rover. So it's not as if AM radio is going away. But it's interesting that these big car companies have made the decision not to have it. Now, in some cases, it's related apparently to the issue of electric cars. Why? Because electric cars apparently interfere with the AM radio signal, and they produce I guess a lot of static, and maybe at some points it's indistinct what people are saying on AM radio. So there's an evident incompatibility between electric vehicles and AM radio, and that is the rationale for this decision by some of the companies. But for example, with Ford, they're not just taking the AM radio out of the electric vehicles, they're taking the AM radio out of all vehicles. Now, when you ask these guys why they're doing it, their reason is a little bit strange, because they say, well, listen, today there are just a lot of options for people to get their media content. And there are lots of people who are listening to podcasts or going to streaming. And all of that is true. But the question here is not whether we have a radio that accommodates all these different formats, but whether we have radio that includes AM radio in the first place. Now, you might think that AM radio is a conservative cause. And yes, in terms of talk radio, it is dominated by the right. It's dominated by conservative content. And in fact, the company that sponsors this podcast, Salem Media, is very involved in AM radio. But it is also the case that AM radio is, as I mentioned a little earlier, very much relied on by people for local content, traffic patterns, weather. It also is an indispensable a resource for a lot of poorer and immigrant communities. And so you have, for example, AM radio is commonly used by Polish and Russian communities in Chicago, Farsi communities in Los Angeles. There are 5 Vietnamese AM stations in Northern and Southern California markets. There are some 700 AM stations nationwide that are Spanish language radio. And so there's a sort of an interesting bipartisan coalition of Republicans and Democrats who are talking about ways to protect AM radio. Now, I don't know if this involves any sort of legislative action. It might. But it also involves reaching out to these car companies and saying, listen, AM radio serves a purpose. You may think that we're in a new market and that young people, for example, don't listen to AM radio. That, by the way, is not true. Young people do listen to AM radio while they're in the car. Now, while they're on the beach, they may do something else. And it is true that media patterns do change, but AM radio remains useful, remains vital, and for some people is indispensable. And so I think AM radio does have a future and should have a future.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.